Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. Today's card uses multi-step stamping with the Garden in Bloom set by Stampin' Up. I'm using this large flower, which has 3 pieces, and this small flower, which has 3 pieces. So I'm going to start off with my large one and some Daffodil Delight ink. And I'm going to take the first stamp, ink it up, and then I'm going to grab a piece of scratch paper that I'm going to use for stamping off. And Stampin' Up has great results with the stamping off technique. So I'm going to stamp off my largest stamp, and then I'll stamp it down on my cardstock, which is Stampin' Up cardstock because it always works best with the Stampin' Up inks. So I'm going to hang it off the edge of the paper just a little bit. And now I'm going to grab my second stamp. And you'll see that these stamps all have arrows on them. And I've got my images prepared here to the left so I can line everything up. Now here's the arrow for this stamp. So I'm going to orient it according to my image to the left here. And because I sort of randomly stamped that first flower, I'm going to rotate my paper so that it's exactly even with my image on my stamp set. And that way when I line both of these up, they'll both be in the direction of the arrow and they'll line up the way they're supposed to. And notice I didn't stamp off on that second stamp, so it gives me a darker image. So it's a great way. There's an arrow here also on the third stamp, the outline, and I'm using some black archival ink. Anyway, it's a great way to use just one color, and so you have 2 tones of the same color. It's really convenient. All right, so I'm going to stamp this in the same direction using the same technique as I did on the first 2. And now I'm going to continue on with 2 more flowers, stamping them off for the largest stamp. And again, I'm kind of stamping this a little random. I don't want them all to be in the same direction, so I'm just going to rotate my paper whenever I do that second stamp so that it lines up the way it's supposed to. Now I decided I was going to do 3 of these bigger flowers. And it's kind of hard, and I do a lot of deliberation in this card. It's kind of hard to sort of make sure that you're stamping everything so that when it's all over, they're all spatially arranged the way you want them, you know, just nicely apart from each other, all equidistant and all that. But it's not going to turn out that way because you just sort of have to go with the flow with the different size stamps. Alright, this flower, when I first stamped my archival ink on this first flower only, I think I didn't spend enough time getting the ink on the stamp, and so some of the areas were a little faded, and I just took my black Stampin' Up marker to fill that in. Alright, my second flower is going to be using Tempting Turquoise. I'm going to go through the same exact process by stamping off first on some scratch paper, and then my second stamp is not going to be stamped off, so it's going to show up darker. Now you'll notice I'm not using the image as a guide to the left like I did the first time, and that's because this is so small and I just figured it was pretty simple and it's supposed to have that whimsical look. So I just sort of eyeballed it. There's a white spot in the middle, and I just sort of made sure that whenever I was stamping again, I just kind of had that white spot in the same area. For my third color, I'm using Crumb Cake ink, and I thought this would be kind of a nice neutral to go with my yellow and blue. And you can see again, I'm just sort of really deliberating a lot, and it came out okay, but I thought my flowers were a little crunched up in the middle, a little bit, a little crowded in the middle, but I'm not sure it would go noticed. So anyway, I just went with it. Now I'm going to use my MISTI to stamp my sentiment, and I'm going to rotate it a little bit. I always kind of move my MISTI around depending on where I'm stamping. This stamp is from the Butterfly Basics set, and it's going to hang off the side. I actually had to move it to the other side. And I'm using this Thinking of You stamp from Altenew. It just fit nicely with my line here. Now I'm going to place it using my grid sheet to make sure it's straight, and then I'll ink it up and stamp it on the bottom. Now I kind of wished that I had used the archival ink, because the archival ink really is a dark, dark, dark black. And this, it is one of my favorite inks, this VersaFine ink, but I wanted it to kind of match, but whatever. Anyway, so I'm going to put this Thinking of You on there and make sure that it lines up with my line, and then I'll stamp that. I wanted to fill in these areas in between the flowers, but I really wanted to keep this simple. I didn't want to do a bunch of fancy masking or sophisticated masking where I stamped the flowers onto some post-it or masking tape and then cut them out and put them over and covered it up and everything else. I wanted to make this a quick and easy card, so I just grabbed a mini post-it And what I'm going to do is kind of cover up whatever area I'm currently stamping as best I can. And so it's not going to be perfect, but I really didn't want to go through the trouble of cutting all those masks. And I also didn't want my stamps to look like they were just like this 3-dot stamp consistent all over the place. I wanted it to have like a single dot here and there. And by the way, this dot stamp is from the watercolor wing set, but you could use any stamp that just has a couple of small dots in it. And so I'm just going to go around and make sure that I fill in all the areas and keep it more at a diagonal, all these flowers. Now I trimmed my panel, but I actually didn't trim it correctly. I took off more than I wanted on one side. I just wanted a mat at the top and the right, and I took off more on the top than I did on the right. And so that I figured out, I was like, what is going on? So I measured it and figured out what I had done. And so I made sure that my top and right mats were the right size. And then I had that extra at the bottom right here. So I just went ahead and trimmed that off with the trimmer because I really just wanted a mat on the right side and at the top. I'm using some frosted lace stickles for the centers of the flowers. This bottle of stickles has just some silver glitter in it. It doesn't have the iridescent or multicolor glitter, so it's nice and simple for this card. And that's it for the card today. Just some simple stamping. I didn't want to make it too fancy, and I wanted it to be pretty quick. So aside from the deliberation, I think it was. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.